America is an image-conscious nation thriving on the surplus of models, actors, social media, and thousands upon thousands of diet trends. But when does a simple, healthy lifestyle stray too far?
What is a thigh gap? When you're standing straight up, there's like a gap in between your thighs. Girls just don't want their thighs to touch.
Nearly 250,000 teens had cosmetic surgery last year.
No.
The Kylie Jenner challenge has gone viral. Doctors warn it can cause a number of issues.
Oh my God.
My oldest daughter, who got sick when she was 14 with restricting type anorexia. And it took us a little while to figure out that that's what was going on, mostly because we had no idea that that's what was going on. We had no experience with it. And because, of course, it's a disease that hides itself very well. And I thought people with anorexia needed to have lost a lot of weight. That's not what happened to her. What happened to her is she just didn't gain weight when she should have. So it's hard when you're a kid or a teenager because you're supposed to be constantly growing. And I think people don't necessarily look out for, well, what if you're not growing, not just what if you suddenly lose 20 pounds.
So the beginning of my experience with an eating disorder probably goes back to age 14 or so. Or maybe even a little bit further back, let's say 8th grade. What is that, 13 years old or so? I was actually a little bit overweight, and I was always really self-conscious about it. Got teased and taunted and whatnot. And I got exposed to mountain biking, which was the first sport and physical activity that I really felt that I could do. And I just sort of took the ball and ran with it. Freshman year was definitely when my relationship with food, body, exercise really got pretty unhealthy. Started exercising more, eating less, researched nutrition, calories, the different types of nutrients, and just sort of took it a really strategic approach to eliminating as many calories as I possibly could from my diet while increasing exercise. It's very calculated in most regards. And by the beginning of my sophomore year, so 15 years old or so, I recognized that I was no longer in control.
The mortality rate associated with anorexia nervosa is 12 times higher than the death rate associated with all causes of death for females 15 to 24 years old. Eating disorders are a mental illness, with over 50% of cases rooting back to genetics and psychological defects in the brain, specifically the amygdala. When the body begins to sense stress, it can release a hormone known as CRF, which has direct links to the amygdala and can cause it to malfunction, which leads to all emotional triggers and balance being thrown off.
Okay, so the details, the nitty-gritty of having an eating disorder, and the rules. Yeah, there are a lot of rules that I set for myself and kind of pulled out of thin air, that somehow became very, very solid things that I adhered to. There were certainly a lot more rules in the initial stages of my eating disorder, when I was, kind of more of a textbook anorexic. And they had to do with anything and everything. They had to do with exercise. They had to do with homework. They had to do with, the way I saw myself behaving in relationships. And it all basically came down to perfection. That was the one word that I sort of lived or died by. And I decided I was going to do everything perfectly. And I strive for that perfection in, my body, my schoolwork, my relationships, my physical activities. And so there weren't so many specific rules, which might have been worse because I had this sort of ethereal idea of what perfection was, but my best was never what I thought it was, but it wasn't clearly defined, so it was a losing game. And essentially, if I did something that I thought wasn't perfect, I just ate less and ate less. But one of the very structured sets of rules and one of the real stepping stones in getting me to my sickest point was my mom and my co-raised me, they've always struggled with their weight, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. So growing up, they were constantly on fad diets, diet after diet after diet, and my mom went on the low-fat diet, and pretty open-ended. The only rule was 10 grams of fat or less per day. I adopted that diet and followed it like it was holy scripture. I mean, that I lived my life by 10 grams of fat or less per day. And I practiced and I practiced and I practiced, and I got better and better and better to the point where I was eating zero, every day, consistently for months and months and months.
Bulimia nervosa is characterized by the act of purging. It can begin as an episode of extreme eating, also known as binge eating disorder, but can lead to such severity that anything consumed is then purged, even water. Scratches on the back of the hand and knuckles, also known as Russell's sign, can begin to show when a person has tried to prompt their gag reflex with their index finger.
I felt so disgusting in my own body. I remember when I was younger and I first started exploring it, I didn't feel like who I was okay, that I was enough, that I was worthy of living or existing. And that translated into the way that I viewed my body, not processing rather the emotions that I was experiencing and the level of deep pain that I had. I didn't have an authentic outlet. And so it kind of projected itself onto my body, onto feeling uncomfortable, comparing myself to friends or other people that I saw, and feeling like I had to do everything necessary that was in my power to change who I was so that I could be somebody good enough, lovable. And it started with trying to throw up and that not really working and feeling like I didn't know what I was doing. And it turned into anorexia and just not eating. When my anorexia was at its worst, it changed. The rituals changed. It would be 2 crackers a day, and I'd break them into very small pieces and savor each little bite throughout the day. Or it would turn into, I remember it being carrots and lettuce, and I would take a sweet and low packet of mustard and water and shake it all in a bag, and hot sauce. It was an odd concoction, but it kind of, I guess it had all the different flavors that you kind of missed in food, and I would eat that in the middle of the day and let that fill me up. I remember having Diet Coke constantly, 20 cans a day to fill me up, until I got so extreme with it that I was afraid of even gaining water weight. So it turned into throwing up even the little bits of food that I was eating, no matter what that was. And bulimia started happening, and I realized I could enjoy food without having to gain the weight, because it wasn't bulimia in that the standard, not that there is a standard, set that bulimia is, where a lot of people eat normally throughout the day, and then in privacy, they go and throw up, maybe in the evening. I threw up everything. Not one thing was left in me, not even really water. If I could help it, it was always accompanied by something, and it got to the point where I didn't have to stick my finger down my throat. I could manipulate it through the liquids that I consumed in the muscles of my stomach and let it come back up. And it was so severe that when I was doing it, like I think I said before, there was no room for any other relationship in my life, because I'd wake up and I'd eat until my stomach literally was ballooned out. And then I would purge until the scale registered the same it was before I started the binge. And then that would be done, and there'd be a few minutes until I started the cycle all over again. And it didn't really matter where I was, I'd always find a way. I remember throwing up in bags in my parents' kitchen because I didn't want them to hear me throwing up in the bathroom, or pulling over on the side of the road when I was older because I couldn't wait until I arrived at a destination where there was a bathroom, and throwing up in a plastic bag. I could not stand feeling something inside of my body.
So there's not one event that really I can trace my eating disorder back to. It's more of a time frame. And quite honestly, it was a whole cluster, you know what. I was about 5. We moved to a new location. My dad was a Vietnam vet. He was suffering from PTSD. He was quite abusive. Daily fights, just horrible daily fights that would go on through the rest of my teen years. My mom would be diagnosed with ovarian cancer during this time period, which in the 70s was basically the kiss of death because no one knew what to do with it. And there was also, my dad had a mental breakdown. And then there was the guy down the street, or one block over, who was at the halfway house, who sexually abused me right outside my front door on the sidewalk as my mom was in the kitchen cleaning. And she looked out and saw what he was doing and came out and stopped it. The reason I know that happened is because I've been in therapy a long time now. I started when I was about 18 and I'll be 45 next month, if that tells you anything. And as I was going through therapy, a lot of what came up was sexual abuse. And I was trying to figure out where it came from. So I called my mom and we talked about it, and she told me that there was a guy and that she had filed a report for what had happened and the situation. So that was very eye-opening. And it was also eye-opening in the sense of I sort of remember the event, but not like the actual sexual abuse happening, but it affected me in such a profound way, and it continues to affect me to this day. My mom became an alcoholic during this time period to deal with everything going on, so it was quite a crap fest. So when we would go to the grocery store, and this was a vivid memory I have, every single day after school, she'd pick me up and we'd go to the grocery store, and this was daily. She'd buy a 12-pack of beer, and a box of Mystic Mints. So for those of you who don't know what Mystic Mints are, they're like Girl Scout cookies with cream filling dipped in chocolate. Right. And the best thing about that was I can hear the box open. I can remember opening the box. I can remember eating the box. And we would eat a box a night. Every night. And I never saw my mom drink a beer, but every day she'd buy a new 12-pack of beer. And then Doritos would become not like a lunch bag, it would become like a whole bag after school. And progressively, the food issues just sort of began to pile on top of each other. And if you look at my photos starting from kindergarten, I'm just like an average little kid, and then I blow up like a blimp progressively. And you have to remember, I was overweight at a time when kids were not overweight. I was not the norm. And today that is the opposite. We have more overweight children today than we do have children who are thin weight or normal weight, whatever you want to call it. I didn't have real friends, and they made a lot of fun of me, and they were very cruel. Walking home from school was crappy. I remember vividly one day there was a kid who said, "Hey, what are you doing down here? I thought you were up there." And I looked up and the Goodyear blimp was flying overhead. And this was standard. I began being bullied in 5th grade. I still remember her name. She threatened me. This went on through 8th grade. It wasn't a joke. My grandparents had to pick me up after school every day from 5th grade through 6th grade. And then 7th grade, just going into middle school was awful. The PE locker room was a nightmare because here I was, this fat kid amongst all these skinny athletic people, and quite honestly, the teacher hated me, and she did. Miss J hated me, and she had this game she played. Now, understand, I am always the last person to come in from running because I hate running, and I'm just not good at it, and I'm not athletic. So once a week, we would have what they call the Grand Lap, which would be a mile run. And she would give a chance to half the class to be able to opt out of that. But the way they had to get the opt out of it was to choose who would win her race. So the way she would choose people is, let's put two shortest people against each other. Let's put the two tallest people against each other. Let's put a boy and girl against each other. Let's put the two skinniest people against each other. And no lie, one day she said all that and then looked at me and said, and let's put the two other people together. So she pitted me and the other boy in the class, who was the biggest boy, against each other. And as you would line up at the field to race against your opponent, you would turn around and you would see who in the class chose you, as though you might win. And I turned around and there were two people behind me, out of the entire class. One would end up being my best friend, and the other one was the person who actually liked the running class. Yes, that person. She was on my side. And every other single person in that class was on the other side. And I remember just feeling so, just heartbroken and just condemned in some ways. And you know what, damn if I was gonna let them win. I was gonna show them, and I turned around and I ran my ass off and I won. And do you know what? The teacher did not make anyone run that day. And I was so pissed. Because it was just another example of how no matter how hard I tried, when people made fun of me or put me down or categorized me because of my weight, that I could never rise above it when given the chance to do that. So I have this cat, I wish you could meet him. His name's Squirt. And I tell everyone that he is the raw version of what a binge eater looks like. Because it's all about food. Like, and it is an obsession, but he doesn't hide it because he's a cat. And my mind is very similar to that. It's better now, much better now. But it was to the point that you know, it's like I would go to bed before I'd fall asleep. I'd be obsessing, like, okay, tomorrow morning for breakfast, how am I going to get this? How am I going to get this? How am I going to eat this? I got to have this set up for them. I got to have that set up for them. Okay, no. I'm going to restrict. I'm going to restrict, and I'm going to keep this under control tomorrow. So I'm only going to have this, and I'm only going to have that, and I'm only going to have this. Well, the problem with that is I was restricting for breakfast if I ate that, and I was restricting for lunch, and then I'd get to dinner and I'd eat. And then I'd wait till everyone went to bed. And then I was really good at that. Really good. And I've met people who will be like, yeah, I went through the drive-thru and got 2 meals, kept one in my car, and I'd go back out and eat one later after everyone was fed. I wasn't that bad, but it's a strange obsession, at least for me, like to the point that all I would, like, it's like food, and your brain doesn't shut up. And it's not like a voice talking to you, it's just like food. And you would think in Los Angeles, Vanity, LA, that with the eating disorders that are crazy here, you'd be able to throw a rock and hit a psychiatrist that specializes in eating disorders. And I will tell you that it took me a year after leaving hospitalization to find someone. Okay? A year in Los Angeles. That's ridiculous. But when I did finally find a psychiatrist and a psychologist to work in conjunction, I totally lucked out. Because my psychiatrist actually listened to what I didn't know I was saying. And he heard, okay, I hear this. And you say that you're obsessing about this food. Well, there's this medication over here that's actually been used for seizures, but it's been shown to help this over here. Would you like to try that? Sure. So I call that my shut the fuck up pill, and it works quite phenomenally. Now, it's not going to work the same for everybody. For me, that has helped tremendously. And and with that, I have been able to, and with his help, I've been able to adjust my meds and get to the point where I am now able to sit here in front of this camera and do this interview. Because let me tell you, 4 years ago, this never would have happened, okay? Just would not have happened. Or wear an outfit that's not a uniform. I mean, I have really had to force myself to progressively add in mascara or a skirt or something that wasn't what I would call a uniform, my black pants and my black shirt and that sort of thing. And for everybody else, those things seem so normal to do that every day. And for me, it was a struggle, and it has taken 4 years to get to where I am today. So my path has not been about, obviously, losing weight necessarily. It has been about coming to a place where I can accept myself as I am before I can move on to that next step. And it is very hard. I probably won't be able to watch this footage, but I am sitting here because I think it's very important that this be spoken about.
My eating disorder, my suffering with an eating disorder, I mean, for lack of better terminology, it tore my family apart.
An eating disorder often spreads farther than a single victim. The effects that the illness can have on family and friends can be catastrophic, especially feeling the effects of high levels of anxiety the disorder can bring.
As I was getting further and further into my illness, and I like to say like my darkness, because it kind of enveloped me at one point, I was a bulimic, so I could eat in front of my family and then go throw up. And my parents never thought, because I was anorexic for a while, and then once I started eating, they thought, yes, this is so good. And I was in theater and I was dancing and performing, and I was pretty fit during that time. So when I lost weight as rapidly as I did wear baggy clothes, but I knew how to put on makeup, so I would put like bronzer on certain areas, or blush to make me look less sallow. And I was an enterprising young woman, which is what my mother said when I was lying in the hospital after they finally realized what a problem it was. She's like, "You are a smart girl, but you don't have to be smart with us. You just have to be real and honest, and we're here for you. There's no shame in what's happened." My mom told me, the nice thing about it is throughout it, I think my mother knew, but I think she also wanted to show that she trusted me, and that there was a point when she and my dad were going to intervene. But I think because I was such a good liar back then to her, to myself really, that they just trusted.
She does have a younger sister who was deeply affected, and I think still has a lot of feelings about the whole thing, because our whole life had to revolve around what she needed to do to get better and about making sure she ate. And there was a lot of conflict. There's always conflict. It's not like take your medicine for pneumonia, and there's always a lot of drama and conflict. That's the nature of the disease. So it pretty much sucked up a lot of our lives for a long time. And yeah, we didn't want to be, it was hard to be social, and it made me realize how much social life revolves around eating and meals. And when you can't go to someone's house for dinner, that really isolates you. So there are a lot of effects. Psychologically, we were exhausted too. We were just completely worn down. I came to hate cooking dinner or cooking anything. I still am not too happy about cooking years later. I think it traumatized all of us, to be honest.
Go ahead.
My eating disorder definitely influenced my life in every which way. It was my obsession, essentially. And I could see how it was affecting those around me once it was revealed. People couldn't help but start noticing that I was losing weight, and when I'd show up at dinners, we didn't really have family dinners at home. We weren't really a close, tight-knit family, but we were in a religion that we would gather after for food and going out to eat. And so I wouldn't touch my food. I'd play around with my fork, and people started noticing. So I couldn't engage in the same way, because that was how I related to all those around me, because I was so heavily entrenched in religion through my parents that that's what we did. And it definitely affected that dynamic of the way that we all kind of communed together through the sharing of a meal. But more intimately with my parents, I could see the confusion and the anger rising up with them. I remember one day my dad was yelling at me to step on the scale so he could see how much I weighed, thinking somehow that he could control it, not realizing that all that did was just to make me feel less and less seen and shameful of my body, and I felt like he was taking my own control away through trying to control me. And I remember actually living with my sister for a while because she felt like she could help me because my parents couldn't. And she was terrified to hug me because she was afraid I was going to break because I was so skinny. It put a distance between us when there was already a distance there. And through those I was close with, like my sister and friends, it created a space between that put me further and further on my downward spiral and into kind of not being able to see the forest through the trees through the forest. I got that backwards. And I remember my best friend at the time when I was younger came over, and I was just so stuck in that cycle of throwing up constantly that I didn't want to do anything else. I stopped having fun. I ceased living, and I ceased thriving in life in any way that I might have been. And I wanted to feel normal. I wanted to feel like I could hang out with my friends and order a burger and fries at In-N-Out and have fun, but I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to.
I wanted to be a champion for Courtney and for my dad and for my mom and everybody else, and didn't really take care of myself the way I should. And so I would put up a front that I was good to myself, and I knew the language that was expected to comfort my family when they were worried about me. And it wasn't until Courtney, my sister, started seeing stuff like I had a lot of breath mints. I had like those Listerine things, but it was like a Listerine bottle, a spray bottle that I kept in my locker. And one day she came to pick me up from school because I had a doctor's appointment. It was an eyesight because I wear glasses. And she saw my locker. She saw that it was so neatly organized, but that I had breath mints and Listerine and even hand sanitizer. And she's like, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but I don't like it. That was my sister's way. And my family was always so supportive, and they gave me space and trusted me enough to where they could see me about to jump off a cliff, and they would stop me. But I thought that they weren't aware at all. I was like, oh, they don't know. I'm fine. I'll just wear a baggy shirt. No one will notice. Family dinners, when we went to Christmas dinner with my dad's side of the family, huge. My uncles and aunts, they are very blunt, and they mean it with the greatest of love, but my grandpa and my grandma on my dad's side, they were much more subtle. They never talked about it. It was more taboo. But on my dad's side, which I was grateful, people would be like, damn, you got skinny. Are you losing weight? Whoa! There was one moment where people were like, oh, you look like a model now. And then the next moment, it was like, are you okay? And I desperately wanted people to be like, you need to eat something. I thought that was the ultimate compliment. I was like, what, thank you, okay. I've been trying this new diet. I'm killing myself. It's not cute.
recognition that I wanted to stop what I was doing, that I wanted to start eating again, start to regain my health, and I realized that I couldn't. I was too far gone. My behaviors had become compulsive at that point, and so I lived that way for a few months, wanting very, very badly to reach out for help or to change my behaviors and somehow, go back to the life that I was living before things got so out of hand. And I couldn't, and I was getting very, very desperate. And one day at the beginning of my sophomore year, I just couldn't do it anymore. Broke down. First period nutrition class, we had a test, and I just lost it. Had to leave the room, and the teacher of that class was the first person that I ever said, I have an eating disorder. I'm anorexic, and I need help. The topic had been kind of brought up here and there by family members, friends, things like that, but no one ever said, you need help, we need to get you help, anything of that sort. So it came down to me having to ask for it, and then things happened pretty quickly. I was flown down. I was living in Northern California at the time. That's where I'm from, and within a couple of weeks, I was in residential treatment, in Downey. And stayed there for 3 months. I won't say numbers, but I effectively doubled my weight in that 3-month period that I was there. I realize now that I was very, very close to death when I got checked in there. And I didn't see it then. You or I in that position, it's like you're everything's backwards, and it stands to reason that you're starving yourself, you're depriving yourself of all the things that are supposed to help you live. So it stands to reason that everything I based my happiness on was backwards too. So I took the fact that I was so close to death when I got there as, sort of achievement. I felt proud about it for a long time. But got out of residential, moved back to NorCal, and started IOP, got back into high school, which was a strange experience, coming in midway through the year to a new school, all the questions of where'd you come from, what do you do, who are you, why are you here, I didn't have any preparation or any way to answer that, so it was a real learning experience, and stayed healthy for the most part for the rest of high school, or at least what I thought at the time was the most part. I have some more insight now. And realized that I really just swapped behaviors from restricting and the more stereotypically anorexic behaviors, and just swapped them out for a form of exercise, bulimia. But that went completely unnoticed because my family was undereducated. I didn't know, and to myself and everyone else, I was no longer participating in the behaviors that defined my eating disorder prior to my treatment. So I still wasn't healthy. I still didn't have a healthy relationship with food, and my relationship with exercise became even more unhealthy than it had ever been. After I graduated high school, it was essentially a slow, steady, well, sometimes a lot faster decline into a full-blown relapse. So there were ups and downs. The relationship with exercise and food became more and more and more unhealthy until it was just downright toxic. Became a professional athlete somewhere along the way, and probably the worst sport that I possibly could have. A sport where, cycling, just like dancing or track or anything like that. The lower the body weight is to the strength ratio, the better you are at the sport. I got to about age 24, and just, I had the recognition quite some time before that I was out of control again. I'd relapsed, and it was kind of a surprise when I realized it, because again, they were all new behaviors, and going right along with the food and the exercise, I developed all these self-harm behaviors, all this new stuff that I didn't make the connection right out of the gate that, oh my God, I'm relapsing, I'm back in it. But I had that realization and made some sort of half-hearted attempts to get my life back on track, and finally came to the point in October of 2011 that I realized it wasn't going to happen. And I, again, reached out for help, got myself back into a treatment program in Berkeley, and kind of bounced in and out of that program, graduated it, relapsed, went back in, and in the latter part of 2012, I was back in that program, and they essentially said, we can't help you. We can't give you the help that you need here. You need to go back to residential, and wound up in La Cañada at the Bella Vita. That was a little over 3 years ago, and I'm still here in LA. I went through the residential, the partial hospitalization, the IOP program, all at Bella Vita, and things just kind of worked out so that I never wound up going back home to Northern California, and it's all worked out for the better. I've been more or less stable since I graduated that program in March of 2013, so almost exactly 3 years ago, and here I am.
So when we did figure out what was wrong and take her to the doctor, I was very distressed to hear what they were telling us about treatment. That, there's not really good treatment, she's going to be sick for a long time, she's going to be in and out of the hospital, and that, I didn't want that to be her life. So we ended up doing something called family-based treatment, which is now a lot more available than it was then. This was back in 2005 or 6. So now there's a whole training institute that trains therapists, and there's been a number of studies on it that show that it's, very effective for a lot of people. But so we were kind of doing it on our own, which made it tough. So we spent about 18 months refeeding her at home. And what that basically meant was everything revolved around her eating and recovery. She did have a therapist, but the therapist's job was really just to support us all in her gaining weight, and her mental status improved a lot as she gained weight. So,
So my process as far as getting into recovery and staying in recovery, when it comes to like the day-to-day structure that keeps me moving, I would say I was lucky enough for the 3 different treatment programs I've been in. They all used an exchange system. It made sense to me when I was a teenager. I latched onto it. I found a lot of comfort in that structure of having a meal plan and the exchange system. It still made a lot of sense to me when I went back in my mid-20s, and I was kind of able, like I say, I was familiar with it, and so that was one aspect of treatment that I didn't have to reacclimate to. And if you don't know what an exchange is, it's I see it like the food pyramid. Like basically, there's different food groups, and you exchange like the caloric value of a food for one exchange. Say a carb exchange, you could look at it like a piece of bread. It just means it has a range of calories, a certain amount of carbs, proteins, and fat. And what that does, or what it did for me, is it allowed me to basically remove the calorie counting component out of my meal plans and out of my daily life entirely, and replace it with this much more palatable idea of an exchange. So it made me a lot more flexible in my meal choices and in my eating in general, because not every exchange has the same amount of calories. And it still allowed me to get the nutrients that I needed to stay on track. So, like I say, I was lucky enough to have that sort of structure in all the treatment programs I was in. And so I graduated, my last program 3 years ago, and I continued to follow the same meal plan that I was given in treatment, and the same exchange values that I was given for at least a year, probably closer to 2 years after having graduated from that program. And then, you know, it turned more into, I kind of sat down, because the nice part about the exchange system is you know the calorie values for each exchange. You have every power in the world to sit down and figure out how many calories you're eating every day. So it's kind of, it's up to you, you know. And I didn't do it for a long, long time because I didn't want to know. It's like weighing yourself. It's just a number. I wasn't interested in knowing. I knew it was only going to hurt me. But after, you know, a significant amount of time, after having been out of treatment, feeling relatively strong, and kind of feeling like, all right, you know, this meal plan is sort of confining me, I feel like, in a way. I did sit down and sort of looked at what I was eating calorically, you know, at each meal and each snack, and I felt comfortable with that. I accepted it. I wasn't scared of it. And I sort of used that information to say, okay, I'm, you know, maybe not going to meet every exchange at every meal, but I'm going to get my caloric goals in. And so I sort of adopted that process for, you know, a number of months probably, and found it to be pretty effective. You know, felt like it was sort of a much more organic way to be making my meal choices, a lot less rigid. And, you know, more recently, I'd say over the last 6 months or so, I kind of just do what I'm gonna do. You know, I feel like I've been, you know, acclimatizing to, you know, eating the right amounts and the proper amounts of the right foods for so long now that it happens a lot more naturally, and I just don't think about it. I don't worry about it. Something they taught me in treatment was to be very mindful of my hunger signals, and so I keep those in mind, and I pick things based on what sounds good, you know, and I recognize that some days I'm going to want more of this and less of this, and other days it's going to be the opposite, and at the end of any given day it's probably going to be all right. So it's been a process, and it started out pretty strict and pretty regimented with a lot of rules and boundaries, and it's sort of developed into something that's pretty free and pretty natural, and I feel pretty good about.
Because I didn't understand that until after I was hospitalized. It was about 5 years ago. It was in October. I started to get really depressed, and depressed in a way I had never been depressed before. And as I say that, it just kept getting worse. The holidays came, and by the time the 25th of December rolled around, I was a freaking mess. Like, I remember being in the psychologist office and her sitting there and saying to me, okay, we'd like to admit you tomorrow. And I wasn't surprised. And my only response was, I really want to be here tonight, but I can't because I have a child and there's no one to take care of him. Is there any way we can work around this? Because here I was 40 years old with a 5-year-old and trying to figure out how to work, how to take care of a baby that had development issues, and get my shit together. And you have to understand that when you get to the point that you're hospitalized, it ain't pretty. It ain't pretty in any sense of the word. And I wasn't hospitalized in the sense that I went to the hospital and was admitted and had an IV put in my arm because I didn't have enough nutrient in my body. It was psychologically, I was not okay, and I needed to have that support there. For me, because of my situation, I think they probably would have wanted to put me in round care, but they didn't. They put me in full-time daycare, which means you would go for 8 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and basically go in the therapy. Within 3 days, my lovely insurance decided, sight unseen, that I didn't need that. They're fucking high. So we revamped that, and I went down to half-time. And I remember when you're going, there's a lot of papers you fill out, a lot of questionnaires so that they know where you're at. And like 100 questions, and repeatedly the questions are very similar. And over again it kept asking me, you know, are you here because you want to be, or because somebody put you here? Because often people who get admitted to this sort of hospitalization are there not because they want to be, but because the alternative is, yeah, not good. it's not their choice. It's their last choice, and they're angry because they want to be there. But I wanted to be there. I was happy to be there because it was the 4 hours of a day for the first time in my life I could come focus on me, and I could get me healthy. And I needed that in a way that I didn't know I needed that. And there's something about being in a room full of people who are experiencing that same moment that you are. And it didn't matter if they were thin or fatter than I was, or looked normal or average or in between. We all were having the same emotions, and that was what I learned the most. I will never walk into a restaurant again and see an ultra skinny girl in a cute outfit and think, look at that skinny bitch, she's got her shit together. I wish I was her. Never, ever, ever again. Because I heard them going through the same pain and turmoil that I go through. And there's something very freeing about that, because no one in that room with you at that time is there to fix you. So you can actually talk, and you can actually say what you're feeling, and you don't have to worry about someone cutting you off or giving you advice or judging you. You're just there in that moment, and you're living it. And I miss it every day, because there's nowhere else I can get that. And no matter how much someone cares about me or is my friend or loves me, they can't give that to me. And I do miss that a lot.
Yeah, being a male with an eating disorder has been an extremely interesting experience. And right out of the gate, as soon as I made as soon as I had the recognition that I had an eating disorder, I was troubled by it because of the stigma that I was aware of, even as a 15-year-old, that it's a girl's disease. It's something that only girls have. In particular, the anorexia, I felt like it's something that only girls have. High school girls, college girls. It's a girl's disease. I couldn't think anything but I have a girl's disease. And I couldn't think anything after that except if I have a girl's disease, does that mean, I'm attracted to boys like a girl? Does that mean I'm more like a girl than a boy? So, that's been a struggle for me, or it was a struggle for a very, very long time, right from the beginning. And I carried those questions with me through, my treatment, my recovery, and that discomfort I had and that unwillingness to sort of admit that I was suffering with the disease that I was, afflicted with. It was only made worse by the fact that the few men that I did encounter in my different treatment programs were all gay. So I felt, even more so than having that idea that, okay, this is a girl's disease, it turned quickly, for me into this idea that, well, maybe it's not just a girl's disease, but it's a girl's and a gay man's disease. And it took a really, really long time for me to kind of come to terms with what I was struggling with and to kind of get over that, and I still find, though, that, I hate to say it, but some stereotypes are kind of true, at least in my experience. Like I said, every other guy I encountered in the various treatment programs I was in, they were all gay, and so that raised a lot of questions for me, and that's something I struggled with. I questioned my own sexuality and what it meant about me, and there were periods where I let people, professionals, convince me that I was something that I'm reasonably certain I'm not at this point.
She's 24 25 now and been doing really well for a couple of years. But during that time, I really got to understand, just from watching her and being so close to her, as you mentioned before, like all the rules, the rituals, like I could see, I think before she got sick, I thought people with anorexia are just being like vain, you know, they just, they just care too much about how they look, they just have to get over that. And what I understood in watching her was, has nothing to do with vanity, although it can be triggered by, as you say, media and like, you know, what other people think of you and say to you, but it's way, way worse than that. It's a brain disease, and you know, it's not that she wouldn't eat; she couldn't eat. She literally, if she did, and then when we did, sort of, she suffered, you know, so much guilt and anxiety, and it was horrible to watch it. Really, it's a terrible. They're all terrible diseases, but anorexia is the one I know best, so I think it's particularly terrible.
A study in 2005 by the National Eating Disorder Foundation found that Americans largely believe that dieting, the media, and family triggers are the most significant triggers in an eating disorder.
So I think people need to understand that it's, first of all, it's not a choice to develop an eating disorder. Nobody sets out and says, I think I'll develop anorexia, although people joke about that. Oh, I wish I had a little anorexia, which really upsets me when they do.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what they're talking about. But so nobody chooses it, and also it's not a simple thing that you can just unchoose. Like, oh yeah, you're right. You can't talk someone out of an eating disorder, right? Because it's not a rational thing. It's a compulsion that comes out of your neurobiology. So the only way to get better from anorexia is what I'm talking about now. Yeah. Restricting anorexia is you have to eat, you have to gain weight, you have to eat regularly, and you just have to restore your brain function. And it's a hellish process, but so it's not something that's in someone's conscious control. And I also wish people knew how, you know, I hate the fact that people with eating disorders are often portrayed as vain or lazy or, you know, just wanting attention. And if you've ever watched anyone go through this, it is nothing. It's none of that. It's not about any of that. It's a severe illness. It's, you know, the most lethal psychiatric illness. Like 20% of people with anorexia wind up dead. So this is not something people choose out of vanity at all. And I think that is reflected so much in the media, right? So all the tabloid covers, like, that show, you know, some celebrity. First they show a celebrity who they think is too fat, and they call her out for that. And then they show a celebrity who's obviously emaciated, and they like accuse people of anorexia as if it was a crime that you were committing instead of an illness that you were going through. And I think that's ignorance.
I worked in media and entertainment for years. I do photography. Mostly I do it as a fine art because I refuse to get caught up in this world of Photoshop and restructuring the human body into something it's not. When my 6-year-old son comes to me and is objectifying his body and telling me that he has body image issues, it's not okay. When he's slapping his thighs and his friends are standing there, male friends are slapping their thighs and telling me they're too fat, it's not okay. It's very strange living in Los Angeles. People are very, you know, we're vain. We have to be. It's part of the business, and I hate it. Absolutely hate it. And I strive not to be that way as much as I can. And that being said, it's almost like there's this, that eating disorders are condoned. That they're you know, it's allowed. They're permitted. If if you don't have one, that you're the weirdo. But yet no one talks about it. It's the strangest thing. You know, I worked on at a food place one time, and we brought the food to this facility, and it was a high-end fashion company, and everybody was there was like decked out, right? Looked hot, great fashion sense, and they all kept ordering French fries. All of them. Like, all these women kept ordering French fries, and I'm like, I turned to my boss, I'm like, they're all ordering French fries. I can't believe it. This is great. They're liberated. going to the bathroom and throwing them up afterward. And I thought, he's right. More than likely, that's what they're doing. And it was so sad because it's a culture in and of itself that we create and we perpetuate. And I don't want that for anyone. I don't want that for my child. I don't want that for his mate as he gets older. I don't want that for anyone who has to. I don't want anyone to have to live through this. I don't want anyone to have to live in this state of mind. I don't. It sucks.
The societal standard that's put up in the media, and then women try to meet it, and then they get criticized. Like, there's no winning.
It increases doubt in your self-image and self-worth.
It brings you down. It warps your idea of what's real.
These images of women, they aren't real. People don't actually look like that.
I just think that it's harming women psychologically, physically, mentally, socially.
Okay, so in terms of, how my eating disorder has changed me and whether I wish I could go back and just undo it and sort of delete that chapter of my life, there were certainly times, especially during treatment, where I wish that I just never suffered with this, never had to experience it. Would ask myself for days on end, why me, why me, why me, why can't I just be normal? And being where I am now, though, and realizing that, I've been dealing with this eating disorder in one form or another for more than half my life, I can't even imagine where I would be, who I would be, what I'd be doing without it, because although it doesn't define me, it's definitely helped shape me as a person. And I feel like I'm probably a better person because of it. I certainly wouldn't be as mindful or as aware of the things I'm feeling. I don't feel like I would look at the world and see the world in the same way. Having been so close to death at one point in my process, I feel like I have a different appreciation for some of the smaller things in life than maybe somebody that hadn't had that experience would have. And more than anything, it's just showed me, how I can do whatever I set my mind to, right? Because if that wasn't the case, I'd still be in the same place I was 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, and more than likely I'd be dead. If we're being completely honest. So I recognize my whole experience, and especially the fact that I'm here now on kind of the other side of it, or getting there anyway. That's just a testament to my strength and willpower and determination.
So where I am now in my life is radically different. I'd say in so many ways. I'm actually really grateful for everything that's happened in my life. The pain and the path, the road that I've traveled on, both with my eating disorder and other outside circumstances, everything has led me to where I am today. And I can see the sequence of events and kind of the procession or progression of everything kind of helping me awaken to my own truth and my own inner essence and finding my authentic self. That if it wasn't for the road my eating disorder took me down, I probably, to be honest, wouldn't be here. I'd probably be dead from suicide attempts. That would actually have worked. It definitely has been a lot of up and downs, and there was times when I was doing better, but it still is kind of a habitual fallback. But where I am now, I've been recovered for about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, fully recovered. And what's really been helpful for me was kind of being on the spiritual path that I'm on, meditating, grounding into my body, connecting into my body instead of that disconnection that was happening, being out of my body so much and being in the mind, being in the eating disorder. Instead, now I tune into my breath and I feel my body and I feel into what my body wants and I honor it.
So looking back overall, I definitely can't say that I wish I never would have experienced it. I can say though that I hope no one else has to, you know, knowing what it is to fight it. I hope everybody else can figure out how to get through life without going through it. It's yeah.
You know, you mentioned that, and it's so interesting. It's a disease. I don't know why we have to listen. It's just like when people were saying that AIDS was a gay disease, and some people still believe that. It's baffling to the mind. I'm not comparing bulimia or anorexia to AIDS, but I am saying that people need to stop trying to put something in a box, you know, like have an idea of what it is, and oh, well, that won't concern me because that's like, oh, it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. I live here, and that's going to affect all those people over there. It's like it can affect everyone, and it's only if we teach people how to open a dialogue and an inner monologue with themselves to where they, instead of purging or instead of binging or instead of being anorexic or bulimic or even thinking less of yourself and saying, I have no worth, you know, you train yourself to think the exact opposite. I am beautiful. I have daily affirmations that I try to do every day. Sometimes it's hard, but one of them was from a movie I watched, and I've read a lot of books about it too. I don't know if you've seen What the Bleep Do We Know or Hungry for Change, but those are some great documentaries. And there's a cardiologist out of New York that prescribes on a prescription pad, no matter what people have, before she gives them blood thinners or anything like that. For 30 days, she has them say, I love and accept myself just as I am right now, for 30 days straight. And when they come back, they have better cholesterol, their heart rate is improved, their skin is better, because when you love yourself, and it's not a silly thing to say, I love myself. It's not a silly thing to teach other people and to realize that what you say about yourself affects everyone around you. Just like my mom never realized, even though they were telling me that I was beautiful, she would look at herself in the mirror, and I thought she was beautiful, and she would say, I feel fat, or oh no, I don't look good, I can't go out like this. That taught me to think the same way. You know, she didn't realize that, but our thoughts have power. And if you have a friend who feels less than, or if you yourself do it for yourself, do it for your friends, redirect behavior, redirect the energy, because everything is energy, and we need more positive energy in this world.